Welcome to the German Records virtual meeting with the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, found at genealogicalstudies.com. My name is Drew von Hasselbach, and I'm a mentoring professor with the Institute. This session, using German newspapers in your research, is being recorded. Welcome to those tuning in live, and if you've found us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find even more content from us here at the International Institute of Genealogical Studies. So here we go, folks. German newspapers. We're going to go through this in 4 different parts. We're going to talk about locating the papers. We're going to talk about the type of content they have. And we're going to wind up with me hopefully handling your very interesting questions about what's going on. So why would we be interested in newspapers? Well, remember, we're doing family history. And literally in the word history, you have the word story. So it's one thing to prove lineages and locate names and dates and that sort of thing, but you want to look for some actual stories. You want to look for some things that your ancestors did. You want to find out if Schmidt happens, I guess. And there's a lot of newspapers that are online, a lot of German newspapers that are online right now. But if you've done a lot of research in this area, you would already know that this information is disaggregated. It's all over the place. It's the same thing if you're doing research in North America or other countries and other language groups. You'll find lots of information available online, but it's very rare that you get it all bundled in together in a nice, simple, single location where you can find the stuff that you're looking for. That is certainly the case for modern Germany. There are a couple of sites that have a lot of content there. They're not absolutely comprehensive as something. If you're doing United States research and you're used to chronicling America, you'll find that site is like a fantastic resource, and it has hundreds and hundreds of papers available on it. I do find that Austria's National Library has a fantastic collection. Um, and it's really wonderful because it's really easy to use. The, it has this, it's not just all German, right? Because Austria, when it was Austria-Hungary, had a gazillion different language groups living in that jurisdiction. And you've got newspapers from all those different ethnic groups and cultures and so on. It's just fantastic. So we'll be taking a look at that. But the ones that I want to draw your attention to are right here. So I would say that right now, as I'm recording this around 2025, the best or the primary location to find German newspapers, that is newspapers from what we now think of as Germany, would be the Deutsche Zeitungsportal. There's the URL, deutsche-digital-bibliothek-de /newspaper. The Zeitungsportal there is part of a larger digital archive that the German archives have started to put together. So what happens in Germany is you get a lot of regional archives, and they have a lot of information that's obviously relevant to their own region, but they're starting to network with other of these regional libraries and archives and sharing the information online. So the Deutsches Zeitungsportal is something that's come out of that, and it's relatively new, but it's already quite large, and it would probably be a good place for you to start research if you're looking for newspaper articles that might mention your ancestors from what is today Germany. There's a site called Zeffis, which is from the Berlin State Library. This is a very small site, but it's very important. And why do I single it out as very important? Well, when before Germany was Germany and Prussia was the primary state that covers what we now consider to be Germany. Prussia was a monarchy, and what the monarchy did was it published on a regular basis um, a government newspaper that announced things like the awarding of medals, the awarding of positions, like who was going to be a postmaster in a certain location, who was going to be the librarian in a certain government library, who was going to receive the Crown Medal third level or something like that. So a lot of that gets published in got published in this these official government publications, and you can find them all at Zephy's. Uh, Anno, I'd already mentioned this. This is from the Australian National Library. I love that site. We're going to take a closer look at it. And Google Books, which is, you know, you're kind of doing the Sesame Street thing. Like one of these things is not like the other. Why would Google Books feature there? Well, I'll show you why. It can be very useful. Just some simple German vocabulary words. Uh, I don't know how much German you particularly know. One of the great things about AI these days is that, yeah, if you know virtually no German, you can do screen captures, dump those images into a chat window and get beautiful translations that are fairly accurate and wonderful. So you may not need to know a full range of German vocabulary, but one thing I think is helpful as you're doing your searching is knowing that what you're looking for, if you're looking for a newspaper, is a Zeitung. And if you've come across a Tageszeitung, you're coming across a daily newspaper. If you come across a Wochenzeitung, that's a weekly paper. So it's probably going to be regional. It's probably going to be a smaller publication. It's probably going to have more like rural news or you know, less of the political hard-boiled content that you might find in a daily newspaper. And you're also going to come across the fact that like words that you'll often see in newspaper titles, just like in English. You know, like we'll have like the Mirror, the Times, the Mail, and so on. Some of the words that you'll see with German newspapers, Rundschau, which means like roundup. It tends to be used, especially in an entertainment context. Courier, which is kind of like the courier or the mail. Amtsblatt, that's an official government publication that's going to have a lot of notices in it. You know, as a publication, not probably the most interesting thing to read just for reading's sake, but fantastic if you're doing research and you want to find out whether your ancestor had a license from the government to do something or that type of thing. Anzeiger means notices. It's kind of like an Amtsblatt, but it might also be more broad and have I wouldn't say it's like a classified type publication because it's often used as well just to refer to a newspaper that just has news in it. Um, but the meaning is like notices. Okay, so where can you find these things? Well, I mentioned the Deutsches Zeitungsportal first. Um, it's really quite large. I don't know what the plans are for it and how big it will eventually become, or if it's already at its full size. But it has 2,000 newspapers, or just under 2,000 newspapers in it. You'll see from this screen grab that I put up here that at least the home page or the landing page here is available in German and English. So you can at least get started in English if you don't have any facility with German. Um, of those 2,000 newspapers, they count more than 4 million issues. So that's 4 million, more than 4 million copies of papers. So this is a pretty rich database. And if you really get down to the page level, more than 25 million pages. So what are the odds that one of your ancestors the names of one of your ancestors lands on one of those 25 million pages? Well, pretty good because it's 25 million pages. Another thing about searching this, and I noticed, or I mentioned that the landing page is available in English, so you can get started at least in English. You do want to learn some search tips. Now, I would tell anybody doing any sort of genealogical research that they should learn some Boolean search terms. You should not be just using Google, typing in John Smith and expecting you're going to find the information you're looking for. You'll just be overwhelmed. Same thing with the Deutsche Zeitungsportal here. There are some tricks you can use that will focus your search a bit and not leave you inundated with so much information you can't sort through it. Um, if you put a name in quotes, that is helpful. But what you really want to do is put the name in quotes and then use a tilde, which is like a tilde, that squiggly thing. It's in the top left of your keyboard. Um, and you put a number. What that says is find those two words to those two words within that number of words apart. So in this case, like if we put August Caspar with the words August and Caspar um, not more than 10 words apart. Why would we do that? Well, if we were looking for August Caspar and his name was August Friedrich Caspar, and we only put his name in quotes, we might not find it because there's other words in the middle. So saying, find August within 10 words of Caspar, it helps um, avoid the issue of you missing the person you're looking for because your search was too precise. Another thing you can use are wildcards. You're probably familiar with this. If you use a star after an initial set uh, of characters, um, it'll search for everything that has the remaining characters. Like the example I have here is Schmidt, right? Well, you can have the name Schmidt with two T's, or you can have the name Schmidt with a D and a T. If you did SCHMI star, it'll find all instances of either Schmidt with a T or Schmidt with two T's. Same thing if you wanted to replace a character in the middle, you can use the question mark. Um, like if you're interested in the name Meyer, somebody on this call might be. You can use ME question mark ER, and that will find Meyer with a Y and Meyer with an I. So tips you should use, not just for this research, but in all your searching online. So I need to find, or I want to find, a death notice for a guy named August Caspar. So I went to Zeitungsportal and I typed August Caspar in quotes, and I used the tilde 10 to find any instance of August within 10 words of Caspar. And this is what I found. Two results. Now the result screen does come back in German. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I did click on the English and it still came back in German. Don't quote me on that. But I did get the results here in German, but just looking at those results, I can see that not the top one, but the second one down, it mentions August Caspar. And I also can read that he is a doctor. This is in German, but I read in German that he's a doctor, and that is indeed the guy that I'm looking for. So I'm going to click on that newspaper page and see what we get. And it's going to look like this. It'll come up like this. And in the bottom right corner, which I've highlighted in that shaded area, I see the family Nachrichten. Now, this is just like in English, the BMD column, the births, marriages, and deaths. What you'll see in a lot of these older German newspapers is kind of a two-pronged or a two-level approach to these birth, marriages, and deaths announcements. There's like the upper crust one where you'll get birth announcements in greater detail and death announcements in greater detail. And then there's a simpler one down below where it's just going to basically mention names in certain situations. But if I'm looking at this collection of announcements, I see Todesfall, which means a case of death or a death circumstance. That's a death announcement, and I see that Oscar, or sorry, August Caspar is highlighted because that's what I'm looking for. So let's actually take a look at what this says. And now, if you've seen my presentation on German civil registration, you'll have heard me talk about how there's a lot of hurdles you have to get over in German research. And for things like parish records and civil documents, you have to learn how to read that old German handwriting, which is takes quite a bit of time to learn how to do. Now, with newspapers, you do have to learn how to read this old fracture of text. That's it's called fracture. Um, it's not as tricky as learning how to read the old handwriting, though, because since this is printed text, all the letters are going to be consistent. So once you get familiar with realizing that the H, depending on what it looks like to you, like a capital H here might look like a D with a little hook on it. Um, it'll take some time to get used to reading those German characters. Now, it's often the case, though, when you're dealing with newspapers, that you can click through to the plain text below. There'll be an icon that will show you how to find plain text. So that'll show you text in like ordinary, what we would call Roman characters that we're used to. So that's one thing you can do. And then actually you could copy that and drop it in an AI chat window and get a nice translation. Or you can, invest the time to learn how to read this. And I, as I read it, the translation I can tell you that this says is that this morning, heute Vormittag, this morning at 9:30, um, entered into rest after a difficult illness. Our beloved husband, father, son, brother, brother-in-law, and nephew, the practicing doctor, Dr. August Caspar, practicing medical doctor, sorry, Dr. August Caspar. Now, this structure, the structure of this death announcement is very typical. You'll even still see this type of wording in German announcements today. It's very common that the person will be described uh, through the lens of all the mourners, how they're related to him, like our father, our husband, our son, our brother, and so on. That's very typical. And it says that Dr. Casper died in his 45th year in Berlin on the 4th day of April, 1901. And this says signed by the mourning survivors. Now, what you'll often see actually in these announcements is the list of those people. So you get cheated here that you don't find out who the wife is, who the sons are, who the brothers are, and so on. They just use the single statement, the mourning survivors, and that's it. But you'll find these, and they'll say, the wife, the son, the son, the son, the daughter, and son-in-law, and so on. And then there's information about where the funeral took place, and I can actually see. Um, uh, I made a typo in typing this, but the funeral hall in the Domgemeinde, that's the big church in Berlin. So there's a big, huge cathedral in Berlin that's not a Catholic cathedral, but a Protestant cathedral, and inside there's a funeral chapel, and that's where his funeral took place. Um, Now, that's a big fancy death announcement for somebody who was obviously a person of means. Down below, you can see just the simple type of announcements that would be typical for just a regular family, and it'll just say like births, in this case, births, and then it'll say the people who had sons, and then there's a list of them. Dr. Nissen had a son, Dr. Gustav Brock had a son, uh, Captain Jobert had a son. Um, Now, see all those doctors? If somebody is actual medical doctor in German, it would be Dr. Med. Um, it's very typical somebody who is a lawyer or somebody with an advanced degree that we would call a doctorate. They would still use the honorific doctor in ordinary course. Um, Anyway, so you can see that there were some sons born to those individuals, and there was a daughter who was born to, well, a medical doctor, Doctor of Medicine Franz Weiss in Dresden. You can see they also provide the locations where the people are from. Now, this was a national newspaper. That's why you've got people announcing these births from all over the place. It's not just localized in Berlin or some particular city. So that gives you a look at what you might see in your typical BMD column for a German newspaper of the 19th century. I want to talk to you a bit about Google Books. And the reason I want to talk about Google Books is that they're a bit of a surprise. They're kind of a hidden treasure for you. So way back when Google was going around to all these university libraries and scanning all the books in those libraries so that it could put them all online, what happened is that old newspapers that had been cobbled up, collected together, and placed into bound volumes for storage and easy research, in later years, they sat on these bookshelves just like all the other books. They might be on a special shelf for really large books because they tended to be rather large, but they got scanned. And so a lot of these newspapers will just pop up in Google Books if you know how to look for them. So if you want to search for one of if you think you have an ancestor in one of these newspapers that might be available in Google Books, well, you would just go to Google Books and search the way you ordinarily would in Google. And I want to find a guy named Johann Friedrich Schmidt from Koblenz. And so I put in that name there to do a search. And he popped up. He popped up in the Amtsblatt der Regierung Minden. Remember, I said that an Amtsblatt is a publication from the government that lists particular announcements for things like, the awarding of licenses or legal notices. In this case, this is an estate matter. And they're just gold if you're looking for details about your ancestors. Because what does this tell you when you take a closer look at it? Well, this tells us, this is actually kind of cool. This was published in 1847, but it says, hey, if you're an heir to the veterinarian, Johann Friedrich Schmidt, who was from here in Minden, but who died over in Koblenz back in 1832, you better show up and collect your share of the estate because there's 34 dollars, 16 silver groschen, and one pfennig lying around here that belongs to you. But nobody's come to pick it up yet after 15 years. And then they give you a date that if you don't show up within 6 weeks, the funds are going to the widow's fund for judicial officers. So there's a lot packed into that little announcement. That tells you that not only does that tell you when Frederick Schmidt died, it tells you he had some heirs that were hanging around in Koblenz. And I don't know, either didn't know that he was dead or weren't too interested in getting those $34. So anyway, there you go. There's an example of a legal notice and a little story that you could have found using Google Books. I want to briefly talk about Zephy's. This is a very tiny database, relatively speaking, but it can offer some pretty big information. Um, One of the things I really like about it is if you have German ancestors and you know German society, you'll know that they really love medals. And they had this whole system of medals. It wasn't just that you got a medal, you got um, the crown order, but the fourth level or the fourth degree. And then you might get the third degree and the second degree. And so you'd work your way up in it. So all of these medals that were awarded, they were always announced because they came from the royal government. They were always announced in these official royal publications. So I did a search just looking for medals that have been awarded, actually. And I found this column right here. It's just personal announcements. And actually, before it gets to the medals part, it's interesting. It talks about how seminary director House which doesn't necessarily no seminar director. So like a kind of like a grad school person, how he had been promoted to the school board and was likely moving to Stettin. So interesting little information about this individual and his career. Rudolph Prince, he well, he got called to the big leagues of being a university librarian because he was offered a job and took a job as the librarian at the Royal University in Königsberg, and that was a big that university was a big deal back then. So congratulations, Rudolph Prince. Hope it all went well for you there. But this is one thing I found really interesting. They awarded these medals not to German individuals, but to four Turkish guys. Because if you know Germany and if you know Berlin and have been there, you'll have been to a museum called the Pergamon, which houses the altar from ancient times. Of the altar that was at Pergamon was excavated and brought to Berlin. And Here, the government was thanking and awarding four Ottoman officials for their work in helping the German archaeologists who'd worked on that. So these four Turkish officials are getting Prussian medals for that sort of work. So interesting little slice of history that it's not medals weren't just for people who fought battles and so on. It was a real part of German society, and it's all documented in these newspapers. Now, I'll, time's getting a little rushed here, so I want to dive into something that I love and I want to share with you, and that's Anno. This is the newspaper library that's available from the Austrian National Library. Now, I find that we in we who are North Americans, or perhaps even Brits and people from Australia and New Zealand, uh, perhaps, um, when we think of like German ancestors, we'll tend to think of Germany proper, but you should really be thinking of all of Eastern Europe, like what is modern day Germany, all the way over into what is now Ukraine and include Poland and so on. The German speaking community covered a broad area. And that's because Germany was, or Prussia was not the only big German speaking country in Europe. Austria, which is still a largish uh, German speaking country in Europe, was a huge country in the 19th century. It was called Austria-Hungary from 1867 until the end of World War One. It had two names. It was called the Double Monarchy. Um, and in fact, if you know German, you'll often see it described as the Ka and Ka because it was the royal and imperial monarchy, the double monarchy it was called. Um, anyway, it covered a broad area, and the people who lived there came from numerous linguistic communities, and they all had newspapers. My mother's father is from Galicia and Bukovina, and there's actually a newspaper there called the Bukovina Post, and I can read what life was like in the 1890s for my great-grandfather, and it's fantastic. So Anno is something you really want to discover. Um, I am familiar with a case that I wanted to look up here. It's a legal case where somebody named Schmidt sued somebody named Rashke. So I wanted to find some newspaper accounts about this. And I put in Schmidt and Rashke in quotes because I wanted to find those two words, but not right beside each other. I wanted to find them in reasonable proximity of each other. So I used the tilde and 10, and I got 35 results. And so there you can see where I did the search. And of the 35 results, I found this rather substantial newspaper piece in a Vienna newspaper. I'm not asking you to read all of that. I'm going to tell you a bit about what it says, but I just want you to have a look at, first off, how large this article is. Because an article this large is giving you a lot of details, and it's going to tell us a lot about Schmidt, a little bit about Rashke, but a lot about Schmidt. if this is one of your ancestors, you're going to get a heck of a story out of this thing. So what actually happens in this story that I came across? It's a defamation suit. George Schmidt owned a theater in this stretch of amusement. There's an amusement park in Vienna called the Prater. Um, I don't live very far from Niagara Falls, and this I always think of like Clifton Hill. If you've been to Niagara Falls, you know what I mean. Like this kind of crazy place of all sorts of fun, wacky attractions. So anyway, George Schmidt owns this theater in the Prater, and he had a former employee named Rashke, who at the time of this article had gone on to a different job managing something called Puschel's Anatomical Museum. And I can only imagine what an anatomical museum was, but there you are. Um, there was bad blood between these two individuals. Rashke published a pamphlet that said nasty things about Schmidt. Schmidt did the same thing. They both wound up in court accusing each other of libel. What does this story tell us about it? Well, amongst other things, this story names the two lawyers who were involved in this case. Obviously, it names the two individuals who are involved in the case. It names the three judges who are involved in the case. In a civil case in Europe, you would appear before three judges, not just a single judge like you might be used to in North America. It also names the 12 jurors and their occupations. And that's very interesting and very crucial for you doing your research because the odds are that your ancestor may not have been the sort of person who owned a questionable theater in the Prater and got involved in publishing allegedly libelous pamphlets about, former employees and so on, but is just an ordinary Joe who got summoned for jury duty. And you'll find these people mentioned in these stories about these court accounts, and you'll know exactly what that person was doing on that particular day, back in the 19th century. It's all captured in time here. So anyway, these two guys, they published these pamphlets, and Schmidt sues Rashke. He's not happy about it. The court takes us through this, all the sordid details in this libelous publication, and that's kind of fun and so on. And in the end, the jury returns a verdict convicting Rashke of criminal libel. That's something that we don't really have in North America. Um, Technically exists in Canada, but it's pretty rare. Um, we're used to a case where we're used to a situation where somebody might sue another person, and if they win, they'll get money. In this case, Schmidt sued Rashke, and not only did he win, because he won the suit, Rashke had to go to jail for a bit and pay a little bit of a fine. So that's all documented in this case. And I just find this fascinating because what do we learn about this? Well, if Schmidt or Rashke was a relative of yours, you have this fantastic, compelling story now. Um, I think just alone learning that Schmidt and Rashke had the jobs that they did, like it's, owning a theater and basically being, is it simplistic to say that they were carnival barkers? They were kind of like that, right? That's the sort of thing that would really, leap off the page of any story that you might be telling. Um, as I mentioned, I mean, a story like this is going to take you into a world where you're going to discover the names of the lawyers, the judges, the jurors. You're discovering a whole swath of the community in this little newspaper story. Um, and you're not just finding the names of the jurors, you're finding out what they actually did for a living. This may be one of the few sources of information where you can find that sort of thing out. So lots of good stuff. Anyway, that is my tour through German newspapers. I could have talked for a lot longer than I did. Um, Whatever the case may be, and keep in mind you are being recorded if that's an issue for you. Just if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to take them. Well, Miles shared, he said that he's found another great site. It's in the chat, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Um, he shared a site that says uh, europeana.eu. And there's an English page. Like I said, themes, Europeana. Okay, Europeana. It has German newspapers as well as newspaper from other countries. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Miles.
Is the Austrian site that you mentioned free to access all the newspaper articles, or do you have to have a subscription?
Absolutely free. You can read whatever you want until your eyes fall out. You
Oh, that's
can,
wonderful. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the old German. My grandfather and his family were from Austria in Vienna, and I have copies of his letters from the family, and it's all in old German. And I've asked some people to help translate. They won't even take a look at it. They refuse because it's the old German.
it can be a challenge. There are two basic types of old German handwriting. One's called Surlin and the other's called current Schrift.
Hmm.
So the the challenge in learning how to read old German handwriting, it's like you actually have two alphabets that you have to learn. It's not just the
Yeah.
one. I have had some success in using AI. There's
Okay.
it was just on the tip of my tongue, and I does anybody know the name of the site that I must be thinking of? That it's really good at reading old handwriting for you.
Google Translate was able to do some of it,
Uh,
but because it's cursive and it
yeah, that's
it that makes it so much harder.
Transcribus. That's what I'm trying
Oh,
to.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a site called Transcribus. Unless it's changed, it is free, I think, for your first 500 documents, and then they ask that you might pay after that. I'm not sure what the last time I saw this was a little while ago, so that may have changed. Um, It's an incredible site, though, because one of the things it does is it's not just for old German handwriting, it's for all types of old handwriting. And they have these libraries of old handwriting styles. So when you upload the image that you want transcribed into, regular characters that you might recognize today, um, it'll ask you which library you should tap into. Like perhaps it's like Cyrillic, an old Russian.
Oh, that would be really good.
So it's really something. Um
Thank you.
yeah, you want to investigate that if you're stuck. I mean, I'd also say like take our course. Uh I found it very helpful. The It's Roger Miniert's book, and the course takes you through all
I
sorts of
believe I actually did that one when I was doing my Canadian record certificate. I think I did because I did quite a few German courses as my electives.
yeah, that's how I did it
Yeah.
actually. Um, if you still have your book, like keep
Hmm.
it and go back and do some of the
Yes,
exercises.
definitely.
Because one thing about this is it's not like, you go for a 3-hour lecture and you're going to instantly know how to do this. You
Yeah.
actually have to do it and practice it and do it over and over again. You know, German people from modern Germany today, like they have problems reading the old German handwriting of the 19th and 18th and 17th
Yeah.
century. It's really quite a challenge. So, but it's the sort of challenge that when you learn how to do it for yourself, you know, it's a real sense of accomplishment.
It is. Yes, I agree. Thank you so much.
Oh, and a couple more points. Yeah, Debbie has mentioned, I'm assuming that's in relation to Debbie, that's in relation to Transcribus, 50 credits for free every month. Um,
Yes.
so that's the current status, I guess, and that's good to know. So you you can pay if you're using a large volume of information, but if you're just looking at the, one or two letters, there's a way to do it. And Miles has also added a few more sites with German newspapers to the chat. If you're not seeing it there, eurodocs.lib.byu.edu. So that's Brigham Young University. He has some historic German newspapers online, and he's got one. It looks like from University of North Carolina. Um, guides.lib.unc.edu, German newspapers historical. Um, and Debbie points out that Anna will translate newspapers as well. Actually, I didn't realize that. I haven't used that feature. I know that underneath all the articles on Anna, you can find the plain vanilla text, and you can grab that and copy it and paste it into like an AI window, and get a translation that way. The other thing I will do is, if I'm a site like Anno and there is plain text underneath the article, but it'll all be kind of like haphazard and there'll be lots of weird characters that won't recognize certain things. Like I'll take all of that gobbledygook and I'll drop it in a like ChatGPT or something and say, or can you make this? What do you think this should say? And it's amazing how accurate it will render what the transcription should be, what the OCR should be, and then you can do the translation from there. Another thing I've done with Anno 2 using AI is if I found an article that I think is interesting, but it's really long and I don't want to invest a lot of time reading it, and wading through all the old archaic German and everything, I'll just get AI to summarize it for me. And like I'll specifically say, hey, um, what people are mentioned in this article? And what does it say about them? And it'll say, oh, this mentions three people from the Runzer family. And it'll get into what. Um, it'll give me a sense of to whether or not I actually do want to invest some time in reading that article. So um, it there's a lot of tools you can use that help you read this stuff. And yeah, there's just more points in the favor of Anno. Um, yeah. Okay. So Larissa has pointed out there is an app that will teach you Old German, but it costs $25 a month. And it's called Decipher Inc. Um, but she says it's been very helpful. So there's another possibility for people there. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. Don't forget to check out some of our other videos on YouTube. Give this video a like, leave a comment, or smash that subscriber button. Um, our next virtual German records meeting, at least with me, will be on Wednesday, September 17th. Students of the International Institute of Genealogical Studies can catch it live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyone else? Perhaps you'll see it on YouTube. My topic's going to be From Heimat to Homestead, German Migration from Eastern Europe to North America. Thank you for joining us. For more information, please visit genealogicalstudies.com.